I think Islam and Islamism are the same thing, but Muslim and Islamists are two separate things, right? So the reason why Islam and Islamism is the same thing is because the idea of Islamism is supposed to be political Islam, like the version of Islam that wants to rule, to have Islamic rule. But that doesn't make any sense because there's no version of Islam that is not political. There's no version of Islam that doesn't want Islamic rule. So Islam is political to its core, and Islamic rule is fundamental part of Islam. So much so that if you remove it, it's not Islam anymore. So Islam and Islamism are the same thing. However, you could say Muslim and Islamists because even though Islam is political, not all Muslims believe that. They're wrong, but what can you do? A lot of people suggest, like, oh, they're wrong about Islam, so they're not Muslim. No, they're Muslims who are wrong about Islam. You're still a Muslim even if you're wrong about Islam, right? So there are a lot of Muslims who don't fight for Islamic rule, Muslims who believe in secularism. And by the way, Johan, you're right. They're missing in action, except in Iran. A lot of people suggest that these so-called moderate, secular Muslims, they're irrelevant because we never see them when we need them. Like, they're not even part of the equation. So who cares? In Iran, though, I must admit that the anti-Islamic Republic Iranian Muslims have been a significant part of the revolution. They need to be recognized for it, and they need to be seen. Fatima Seperi comes to mind when we talk about them. So I do want to give credit to that. But yeah, the rest of the world, there's like, I mean, I'm not saying if it's true or not, but there's a lot of people who have noticed that, at least mentioned that they're missing in action. But yeah, just a Muslim who is not an Islamist is somebody who thinks that Islam doesn't teach you that you have to rule Islamically, that Sharia is not necessarily mandatory. They're wrong, but even they're wrong, they're still Muslim. And an Islamist who thinks that Sharia. By the way, a lot of people who you would think they're moderate Muslims, they actually do believe in Sharia and enforcement of Islamic law. So I don't want to dismiss how significant, how big they are. A lot of Muslims are basically good, decent people, and they should be recognized as such. But I do want to warn you about there are a lot of other Muslims who live normal lives, but if given the opportunity, they would choose the ISIS side, right? The only reason why they live normal lives is because they don't think that the situation is ideal for going full ISIS. There are a lot of Muslims who live normal lives, but if all of a sudden ISIS came over and took over, they would be celebrating the shit out of that. And if they saw Jews were being massacred, they would be celebrating the shit out of that as well, even though right now they're living normal lives. And this is a difficult situation because they are very, like, when it comes to looking at them, they are living identical lives. The Muslims who living normal lives, who are living like are just genuine decent people at heart, and Muslims who are living normal lives, but if given the opportunity between the nation state that they're living in and ISIS, they will go with ISIS if that opportunity arises. And the challenge is that we don't know who's who. We don't know which Muslims who are living normal decent lives right now are the type of Muslim who would just be losing their mind with happiness and joy with the massacre of Jews if they given the opportunity. So that's why I recognize how sometimes people who are in favor of indiscriminate ban on immigration from Islamic countries, if you tell them, but look, this is a good, decent Muslim person, if they basically say, you know what, I don't know anymore, why even try? Like, I sympathize with that. And I know that's unfair to a Muslim who would never do anybody any harm. But again, survival is the most important. Survival comes first. Being kind and being just and being fair is secondary to survival of your nation state.
I want to add then, I just think it's easier if you keep those separated, because we heard that earlier as one, that yeah, dogs are unclean and they shouldn't be. That has to do with religion, like that Islamism, right? That's not secular. You want to have laws that's based on religion. Well, if you're just a Muslim, yeah, you can think whatever you need to think. Like it's just religion. You're basically free to choose that path. But once you make it into politics and want to form laws, that's when it becomes problematic. And for me, it's a very clear line. I can immediately tell the difference. And I think it's getting clouded a lot, and because people find it hard to distinguish what it is. Yeah. All right.
Thank you so much, Johan. Next, we have Adam.
BT's profile picture is a picture of her dog beating up Khomeini in a boxing ring. And that's a picture of her. I know what her dog looks like. And that's her dog.
Okay, in fairness, my dog's legal name in his pedigree is Bohammed. So it's a recreation of Muhammad Ali having knocked out his opponent.
Okay.
That's hilarious. Is my mic working, people?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I originally tried to double raise my hand when we were originally on the topic that you raised, Armin, of I think it was how to hate Islam without hating Muslims, or I forget how you phrased it exactly. I know you're trying to be very careful with the nuances here.
What I was saying is that it's sometimes challenging to communicate with your audience and other activists and other allies to find line between fighting Islam and fighting Muslims, and also to do that without losing allies who might have a little bit of a more difficulty or disagreement with you over where that line is. So do you have any suggestions on how to do this?
Yeah, I wanted to connect it back to a topic that we kind of shelved in another session because we recognize it's a huge topic, which is reforming Islam versus eradicating Islam. And I'm in the kind of let's just say for the sake of argument that I'm the naive idealistic person and I'm wrong, but I'm just going to continue that way for a little while until I'm completely disabused of my idealism. And I've been trying to think of how you actually can get religions to agree, like not just coexist, but to actually argue like philosophers, get the best theologians, get them to argue and like reach a real agreement. And I do think ultimately monotheism has to give in all faiths. But other than that, I know that's a big ask, but I think that once you get rid of monotheism, there's enough wiggle room. And that being said, so I tried to make this framework of 4 propositions a while ago, and I asked ChatGPT, does Islam agree with any of these? And at the time, ChatGPT was Islamophobic, and it said no form of Islam would ever agree with any of those. And I mentioned it in the Goldie Discord, and someone said, oh, well, progressive Marxist Sufism was the only thing that would agree with those propositions. But I think I was saying in the chat that Christianity goes part of the way there, though, because it has this doctrine of hate the sin and love the sinner. And I think that's a guiding light in dealing with, I suggested you could translate that into hate the Islam and love the Muslim. And there was a lot of opposition to this in the chat, which made me realize that I'm right. Usually when people argue with me, it makes me realize I'm right. In that, like, I connect it to the idea of collective guilt being a war crime. And I think that that is a mistake that all sides make in modern disputes, that they, you'll see people talk about Palestinian infants as though they're guilty of a crime, and you see people talk about Jews as if they're guilty of a crime they had nothing to do with. And so I do understand. I'm pretty sure that would be the Goldie retort if somebody said that in her live chat. She'd be like, "Well, why did all the Islamic nations stand idly by during this or that atrocity?" But I think you have to separate collective guilt from punishing someone for criminal organizing. That's a good place to pause those. That was a big mouthful, but that's just kind of summarizing the debate we had in the chat.
Okay. Do you have any questions at the end of that, or was that?
Well, I was
just
responding to your
opinion?
question because you asked for suggestions. And so I think one of the big places to put, I think those are a couple places to push basically conceptually. One is on monotheism itself, because I happen to think that that's the problem, but you could do these all as separate topics, right? There's pressing on monotheism and there's pressing on the idea of collective guilt, which Christianity already kind of prohibits. And it's also in war crime law, there's a prohibition on collective guilt. So I think you could press
So
on both.
I mean, when it comes to challenging Islam, there's so many different ways, right? And I think all of them work because different Muslims respond differently, right? You could challenge monotheism, you could challenge Islamic teachings. One of my favorites is to challenge the historicity of Islam. A lot of Muslims are interested in, conspiracies, you know, and to give them, to show them, and I think like I could sell Islamic revisionism, historic revisionism, as this very attractive conspiracy for them to consider, and how much when they're in, like, that has been very successful when it comes to changing the minds of a lot of Muslims, right? But so I think but the main problem is the main problem is not how to fight Islam, right? That's not what I'm suggesting. When it comes to challenging Islam, my 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 question is regarding the mannerism, the way you treat Muslims while you do it, and how you could advocate not hating on Muslims while you're trying to destroy Islam. But when it comes to destroying Islam, I think that reaching out to Muslims and having friendly conversations with them is the most effective way. And you have to, so that's what I'm asking. Like, that's what I'm saying. How do we talk to Muslims in a way that they bring their guard down and consider what you're saying without them feeling that you're basically coming to make their lives miserable, and by demonizing them, pushing them away from you, and making them not consider your position. If anybody says like, oh, Muslims will not even listen to you anyways, they're already retarded, so they're not going to listen to you, and they're brain dead. I mean, I have been very successful in convincing a lot of Muslims in the past 10 years out of Islam, like a lot of Muslims. So and this is the solution. If you're saying there's no point, then what is your solution? Because then you basically just give up and die. Then I don't know what do you want to do. Like, this is the way. So that's what I'm trying to. But the thing is that because how damaging Islam is, a lot of people, and how people have been hurt by Islam, when you come and say that you're very aggressively anti-Islam, but then if you try to talk about how you don't want to preach hatred towards Muslims, a lot of people think that you're being a softie, right? A lot of people, and if they have been hurt by Islam a lot, if Islam has made them experience a lot of pain and misery in their lives, then when you come and talk about being nicer to Muslims, they dismiss you as somebody who doesn't get how damaging Islam is. So that's the challenge, right? You have to show them that you are very anti-Islamic, because those people are my allies, and my rhetoric, that my pro-Muslim anti-Islamic rhetoric, might turn them off. So how do you convince them that you are in the same fight with them without them giving up on you as an ally when you talk about not hating on Muslims? That's the challenge that I'm dealing with.
Right, and just 2 sentences, I'll let Shadol talk, but I think part of the way to do that is to see what 2 people can agree on, and there's different ways you can do that with, like, a list of sentences. You'd be like, "Do you agree on the Noahide laws? Do you agree on these 4 sentences that I came up with?" You could start with any list of propositions, like, "Do you agree about human rights?" You could just go through the human rights and be like, "Do you agree with this human right? Do you agree with this human right?" I think there has to be a framework that you do that, whatever it is, it has to be a list that you go through, and then you find out which things do you agree on the list. I think it boils down to that. And I mean, that's maybe I'm being naive thinking you can solve everything with philosophy, but that's basically how I would try to do it on an individual level. I've tried it with various people. It's hard. It takes a long time because they'll just, some of these propositions, it's a whole months to discuss them. But yeah.
In Iran, I have a cheat code. I just say, what about Fatima Sepehri? And that would be the end of the conversation. In Iran, we have this revolutionary woman who wears the chador against Islamic Republic, and she's pro-Pahlavi. So every time they want to say like, oh, fuck all Muslims and everything like that, I just say, but what about Fatima Sepehri? And usually that that just ends the conversation. Like, oh, okay, you're right, whatever. Okay, fine. Maybe not all of them. So if I could find a cheat code like that in English, that would be great. But anyways.
Okay, we've got only about 10 minutes left until the hour, and we've got 3 people on the list still. So next we have Sabina.
So when in the Munich conference, there was like a town hall where like Amapur interviewed Prince Reza Pahlavi, and in that interview, she was trying to characterize like Pahlavi supporters as like hostile or aggressive like towards people. And it's I kind of have seen like online like IRGC supporters trying like almost trying to like bait us like into reacting hostily. and I'm like wondering like how much of that is like an anti Pahlavi strategy that they're using to try to like characterize Pahlavi supporters that way. I know Bushra Sheikh like put out another just horrible, enraging video today. And yeah, I wonder if that's something we need to be careful about.
Sabina, have you ever had any connection to Iranian politics before?
Not until fairly recently.
Okay, because you seem very smart. Like you notice something that it takes a long time for other people to realize. Like, you're not Iranian. You're not half Iranian. You don't have Iranians in your
I
family.
lived in Iran as like a 9, 8, 9, 10-year-old child.
Okay.
And just have kind of followed things to some degree.
Okay.
I know a little bit more about the culture than most people that are American, I guess. But
all right, so let me give some context to people and then tell people why your observation, is very smart. So when it comes to Princess Pahlavi, there's this constant accusation regarding the way that they behave. And one of the main attacks on Princess Pahlavi is that his supporters are very aggressive online, right? This has been one of the main attacks on Princess Pahlavi, right? But this also suggests that Princess Pahlavi himself has very few flaws because the vast majority of the attacks against him is against his followers, against his wife, against his father, against his grandfather, against the people around him, because there's so few things they could find regarding attacking himself. With regards to the people being aggressive online, to be honest, that is true because that's true for every side. Because every side, every political position in Iran has a certain percentage of them that are incredibly aggressive, right? What these people don't tell you is that the same level of aggression, more actually, exists on the anti-Pahlavi side. But people don't point that out because they do far worse things than being aggressive online. Like the anti-Pahlavi side, they have murder and terrorism and torture and rape on their record. So pointing out that they are also swearing online, they're like, of course they swear, like they kill. What are you talking about, right? And I mean, even among the leftist groups or Masih Alinejad's fans or Hamid Esmailian fans or the MEK fans, if you go look at how they talk online, they are also, I mean, they are very big fans of the side that they're on. And if what I mean, anybody who does any form of political activity, not just in Iran, anywhere, you know that once you step into the arena, there's going to be some people who are against you who are going to be brutal against you online, and they're going to call you out, and they're going to use words, any form, anything that they could come up with to try to hurt you, right? Like emotionally. But honestly, that's, to me, that is complaining about nothing at all. Like these are just words. They're like just like words. Like these are just comments. Like what's happening to you? Nothing is. But you're right. That given how that is a common attack on Princess Pahlavi, Now, a lot of anti-Pahlavi people, seeing how effective that is to try to dismiss Pahlavi, all Pahlavi supporters as a bunch of crazy radicals online, they do try to poke at them so that they could record their reaction. I must say though that the only reason why their numbers seem high is because there's more of them. Like percentage wise, I think anti-Pahlavi people are way more aggressive percentage wise. But because pro Pahlavi people are just so much bigger, like that's such a bigger movement, even a very small percentage of it going online being aggressive is just going to be such a big number of aggressive people, right? I mean, even 0.5% of all Pahlavi supporters, like we have millions and millions and millions of Iranians. Imagine even if 0.5% of them just wanted to go like act very aggressive against anybody who was anti-Pahlavi online. That is a lot of people that are dedicated to basically. But I do think a lot of them is also fake. So a lot of it is real. A lot of it is MEK active, like, and we know this, like, this is not a conspiracy theory. We know MEK goes online and says we're Pahlavi and then goes out and says the most retarded shit to try to demonstrate that Pahlavi people are cuckoo. Sometimes the Islamic Republic does that. Sometimes they try to bait the people to do stuff like this. I know based on my friends' experience inside Munich that this has been, so let me tell you something that was widely reported on, but a small part of it that hasn't been widely reported on. In the Munich gathering, there were some people who came into the gathering for the day of action as the call to in response to the call to action by Princess of Pahlavi for people on February 14th to come out in cities around the world, especially Munich, Toronto, and LA, and Iranian people came out in hundreds of thousands in each city. Overall, millions of Iranians came out in support of the Iranian people inside Iran against the massacre in early January by the Islamic Republic. So this was a record, by the way. But when Princess of Pahlavi came out to give a speech, there were some people who came into the gathering and they had, Pahlavi signs and, flags, lion and sun flag, I don't know, the Rafshikaviani symbols, all the symbols that shows that they're pro Pahlavi, and they were there to disrupt. I don't know if they were Islamic Republic or MEK. My bet would be on MEK. But when people were guided to give a chant, they would get a different chant. They like all the chants were pro Pahlavi, but when Princess of Pahlavi was speaking, they will hit the drums. When people were trying to chant, they will hit the drums. They will always give a chant. Their crowd would give a chant different from what the chant of the rest of the crowd was supposed to be, to confuse some other people and have like different people contradicting each other. And people were getting really frustrated, and they were called out and they were kicked out. And my friend followed them to try to figure out who they were, and he basically stopped some of them and he asked them, who are you with, like what the hell were you doing? And the person, and he accused him of being MEK, and the person like, oh yeah, you want to beat me, like come beat me. Like the person was like, oh my god, yeah, you're angry, yes, we were disrupting the crowd, do you want to beat me? Like, and my friend told me that, oh, I told him like, oh, I really do want to beat you, this is not a time, but if it was another time I would beat you up. And I told him, you shouldn't have said that. And to me, I told him, did you realize what he was doing, right? He was really hoping that you beat him so that, like, their goal was to get on record that was physical violence among, people who were there. Like, they were trying to get physical violence on the record to basically paint the whole event as something with physical like, imagine if one person beat up another person, right? Then all the anti-Pahlavi people were like, oh my god, there was physical violence among Pahlavi supporters, these people can't even get along. Just one incident, they will use that to paint the whole entire event as something that included physical violence. And the fact that he was so eager to tell him to come beat me up shows that yes, this is part of the strategy to get Pahlavi supporters to behave poorly and then try to use that as a way to hurt Princess of Pahlavi's standing. Sabina, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that that pretty much covers it. I guess I just wanted to add that I guess the one thing that gives me confidence is that, online the Pahlavi supporters just grossly outnumber everybody else. So it's, kind of an encouraging sign, I guess. But anyway, thank
Yeah,
you.
and they do. Yeah, you're welcome. And I just also want to point out in support of Pahlavi supporters that they do have a really clean record when it comes to, physical like violence compared to every other group. You know what I mean? Like there's like all the other groups have assassinations on the record, a lot of physical violence on the record. Pahlavi supporters, when it comes to online people online swearing at each other, like who doesn't do that, right? I mean,
Right.
everybody has some percentage of people doing that. But when it comes to actual physical violence compared to every other group, their record is almost 100% clean.
Yeah, I do want to punch Bushra Sheikh in the face, but I won't be anywhere near her, so it's pretty safe, I guess.
Well, we don't endorse physical violence on this channel.
Right.
Yes, but
Right.
thank you.
Okay. Last on the list, we have Cameron. It is now at the hour, Armin, just as a reminder.
I could do half. I could do half an extra hour because I do want to hear some other people.
Beautiful. And Nail Bunny would like to remind you to please check your Telegram.
Oh, okay. Oh my God.
Okay, awesome. So I was just wondering how the Iranian, so after the IRGC is defeated and you have the reformation of Iran, is there any thought that Iranians have towards like Second Amendment rights like we have in America, not only for things like self-defense, but having seen a tyrannical government and not having a means to defend yourself, is that something that would work in Iranian culture or has a different view now? And if it's not viewed good just because they're in that culture, not used to it, how would you see it personally?
All right. So the Iranian people have a lot of passionate views and discussions regarding the Second Amendment. Okay. And this has been a very, very heated discussion among Iranians, when in our discussion groups, on Clubhouse, on Discord, on YouTube. When this topic comes up, the discussion often gets very, very heated because the Iranian people who want something like the Second Amendment for Iran when Iran becomes free, they don't want it casually. They are very passionate about it. And they argue like, how could you want anything else given that America, given the experience that we had with the Islamic Republic, it shows that being armed is necessary for democracy. We need to be armed to guarantee that nobody could ever rule over us like this ever again. America has proven that this works, and the Islamic Republic has proven that we need this, right? And they're very passionate about this. The other side is also sometimes very passionate about we don't need this in Iran. Iran is not the United States. We need the central government to be able to have the monopoly of force because we are in a very crazy neighborhood, and having everybody being armed is going to cause a lot of difficulty for our government to create stability. I mean, if everybody is armed, as you're basically talking about, the Baluchi separatists, the Kurdish separatists, the Turkish separatists, they're armed as well. There's a lot of people who might be sympathetic to bringing back the Islamic Republic again. They will legally be able to be armed as well, and they might use the legality of this as a way to basically store our weapons to eventually do some terrorist activities. Like they're saying, we don't have the stability of America as when the Islamic Republic falls, and our priority needs to be to stabilize the country. The other side would say that's naive. How could you say that? Obviously, democracy requires an armed, the citizens to be armed. So this is a big, big topic. So I don't know which side has the highest numbers, but I know it gets very heated. And right now, actually, the discussion is more about how we can get armed right now because we're in the middle of a war. But before this revolution started, I remember this being a big topic among Iranians. What do you think? What's your opinion on this?
Well, I am a very, very strong Second Amendment supporter myself. On a personal perspective, I would say, look, my wife, just for self-defense, would never be able to protect herself or our kids. But if she's armed, and in our house, she's always within arm's length of at least one gun in every room of the house, she's able to defend herself from anyone personally there. On a larger context, I think it's best if the population is armed and has a means of self-defense, not only against their own government, but even in the case of World War II, when there were talks within Japan about, hey, what would happen if we were to invade America? And they're like, that's not a good idea, because even then they said, well, there's a gun behind every tree with every American. So I see it not only as a means of personal self-defense, as the people themselves to be able to defend their rights. I see the gun as a symbol of freedom and exercise of freedom, and there's absolutely risk with it. And, there could be some sort of variation that Iran would come up with. Like what you said, there's risks of, well, there's certain types of people that may want to bring in this older government, and then they'd be able to legally hold arms. Well, you could have something where, hey, in this new reformed Iran, if you have these associations from the old government, we can't allow you to own a gun, at least for X amount of time. Maybe rules like this could apply. I don't know, but I know as myself, as an American, I am very, very pro Second Amendment rights, and I think everyone should have a gun and everyone's safer for it. It brings in risk, but at the same time, if you look at America, where do all the mass shootings and things occur? Almost every time it's in a gun-free zone. Places where, everyone's armed, if a shooter does go there, they are killed rather quickly.
So here's the thing. I'm very much in favor for the Second Amendment for America. Very much in favor for that. For Iran, I don't know. I'm in favor of liberty. I usually think that things should be allowed unless there is evidence for it to be harmful. Like the burden of proof should be on the side of somebody who wants to ban something, not on the side of somebody who wants to make something free. So my assumption is that it should be free unless you could give me like undeniable evidence that this will cause harm, right? I do also believe that just because something works in one country, it doesn't mean that it's a solution for every country. I do have also the idea that United States is the guarantor for democracy everywhere in the world. The biggest motivation for being democratic everywhere in the world is that we have the United States. But given that we don't have a United States for the United States, we need Americans to be armed because the guarantor for democracy in the United States is the American people. When it comes to Iran, I do believe in liberty, but I do also believe in skepticism. I am open to the idea that maybe in Iran, there, at least maybe at the beginning, I do believe that at some point we should be able to get armed. But I am willing to get convinced that maybe at the beginning, stability is the highest of all priorities, and the right to life is more important than the right to everything else. So if we need stability, maybe at the beginning, maybe some of our liberties need to be limited until we get a stable country. Because I'm a skeptic, I do believe in the wisdom of the crowd more than individual wisdom, including my wisdom. So that's why I believe in liberty as well. I believe that in a society where you allow people to politically compete with each other, the best solutions and the best ideas will present themselves. And that's why I do believe that if you give the Iranian people a stable framework for different political groups to compete with each other, we will discover what the best solution for Iran is. And whatever my vote is, and as an individual Iranian citizen, I will submit to the will of the Iranian people in that environment, and based on who they pick as their representative, and that democratic process, whatever they decide as the law, if the framework is secure and the people are free enough, I believe the solution that comes out of that is the closest thing to the ideal solution, more than my recommendation. So part of believing in liberty, like believing in liberty doesn't just mean the liberty to own guns, it's also the liberty for the Iranian people to choose their laws. And if the Iranian people choose that the owning guns should be limited or restricted, then that's also part of liberty, like the liberty to choose what laws govern your country. So a lot of people who believe in the Second Amendment talk about liberty, but what about the liberty to limit something, the liberty to choose your own laws? If the Iranian people decide that they want gun ownership to be restricted, that's also the liberty that they should be able to enjoy.
Well,
Right?
perhaps there's a foolproof way to decide who can and can't own guns.